All right, we're going to continue our tutorial from last video where we went over doing setup for your FRC scouting app input. This time we're going to go over collecting autonomous data and creating the UI for that. So to get started, let's go ahead and drag in another group on top of setup and make it around the same size. There we go. And let's get it a color as well. I'm going to give it a nice darkish gray color here. Fantastic. So now I can tell that it's different from setup, and it still is a nice dark color. Okay. Group tab, and let's put it on here about the same place as that. Let's change its color to be the same. Go copy this color from over here. There we go. All right, and let's make its label say auto. And we'll go to button extra actions down at the bottom. And we'll go ahead and pop up my group. And you should have seen that it highlighted red when you dragged it in, so you know it's part of the group. All right, awesome. If we go to preview, we should see that click setup, setup comes up. Click back to auto, auto comes up. All right, really cool, good starting place. Now let's start actually putting some of the data and the inputs onto this autonomous tab. So, like I mentioned in the first episode in this series, the way I'm going to go about a lot of this is by going through what people are scoring in the FRC season. So if we look at the manual, one of the first things for auto is going to be mobility. Also for auto, I'm going to go ahead and include starting location. So let's start putting some labels on here. And let's make this white. And I'm going to go ahead and make another one over here, and this one would be called mobility. Now, mobility is well defined in the FRC game manual for 2023, but in case you're working with students who might not be entirely familiar with mobility, you could change this to something a little more useful, like moved during auto, right? But for now, we'll just keep it as mobility. All right, for starting location, let's go ahead. There's only 3 options, so let's go ahead and just make it a radio. And we'll have our 3 choices be near wall, middle, and we'll have near loading zone. All right, very cool. Let's bring that over to the side here so it doesn't get in the way of mobility. And then let's go ahead and get a toggle on and off for mobility because it either happened or it didn't. We don't want to overwhelm with too many options. So yes, no, and we'll go ahead and place the default as yes because most teams are going to move during auto and it'll make input a little easier for our users. Let's go ahead and just as a stylistic choice, I want to delineate that these two are different. So I'm going to go put a line in between them, make it white, and we'll rotate it. Hold shift while we rotate so that way it gets perfectly to 90 degrees. And then we'll just make sure that it is long enough to cover between these two. All right, fantastic. All right, so we've got mobility, we've got a nice starting location, so we know maybe how our auto might interact with another team's auto. Now we'll get to the bigger part of auto, which is how many objects do they score? Arguably one of the most important things. So let's put object scoring on the top here, since we know we're going to have both cones and cubes. And let's go ahead and delineate cubes on one side and cones on the other. So cubes picked up. We'll start with picked up, so that way we know when we're playing with this team if we're going to have trouble getting enough objects between the two of us. So cubes picked up, and we'll do cones picked up. Great. All right, and after that, we'll go ahead and after we put some of the elements in, we'll also put in the cube and cone scoring. So let's grab a number clicker on here. And we're going to do this a little differently once we get to teleop, but just for the purposes of this tutorial, I want to show you guys multiple ways to do stuff. So for this, we're just going to use an int clicker, so that way we can click up from 0 how many cubes and cones were picked up during autonomous. And we'll put the max at, let's say, 10. We don't want anybody getting too big of numbers here, do we? All right, we'll make it a little bit bigger, and then we're just going to copy it from there. And all right, so we've got cones picked up, cubes picked up. I'll go ahead and make sure that they're centered together here. Fantastic. Okay, So we've got cones and cubes. Let's go ahead and actually do scoring now. So I'm going to go ahead and copy all of my text here, put it down here, and let's do cubes scored. And we'll cover the locations as well in a moment. Do cubes scored, and then we'll do cones scored. Awesome. Now from here, we're actually going to have high, mid, and low underneath each one, no longer bolded on the text, so that way it's clear that it is a subtext of the cube scored. And we'll put high as the first one, and we'll drag one of these guys over. So here's our high count for cube scored, right? And we're likewise going to have a high count for cones scored. Just drag that right over there. There we go. Make sure they're nicely aligned. And then let's go ahead and do the same for mid and low. Okay, very cool. And let's do another line in the middle, again, just to delineate the difference between each one, so that way it isn't as confusing for people. Very good. Now, so we've gotten most of the scoring for auto, right? Mobility, we've got the cones in cubes scored. We as well know other information that just lets us work with other teams' autos, such as where they start and where they picked up. The last thing, if you're following along, is going to be their ending location. So did they dock, did they engage, or did they not even attempt to do either one? So let's go ahead and let's get some text in here. I'll make it white, and we'll have it say ending location. And we'll go ahead and put a drop down over next to this guy. Go, and we'll make it say select location, ... And we'll have it be about 3 lines high because there's only going to be 3 options, right? The first one being they docked, or we'll actually make this no attempt. No attempt. The next one will be docked and engaged. Again, doing this in an order and giving a default value such that it'll be easiest for most people, as only one team necessarily needs to engage at the end. So it's going to be the least likely thing, whereas most are probably not going to attempt it, especially at the beginning of the season. Okay, so now if we go ahead and preview, so you'll notice, all right, we can go up and it should stop us at 10. Fantastic. We've got all of our other stuff working as well. If we look here, there we go. We've got our 3 options. We can scroll, click engaged. There we go. Okay, very cool. Now, if you guys remember from last time, every single one of our fields was actually named inside of the field configuration. So let's go back through all this and just make sure we give names to everything so we can use it later in the app. So in this case, we're going to call this starting pose for starting position. We'll call this one mobility. And we'll go through these, and we're likely going to put names on these that are going to correspond to the labels, right? So cubes picked up. We'll do the same thing for cones. Low cones scored. And we'll click on ending location. And we'll put end pose. There we go. All right, and just to make sure, I'm going to go ahead and click through all of them, make sure that they all have a name, so that way I can refer to them later. High cubes, high cones, mid cones, fantastic. All right, good. All right, everything appears to be in order here. Let me go ahead and go to preview just to make sure everything is continuing to work. You'll see over here, I can actually see all the data that's going into my application. So let's say I click middle here, we'll see that starting pose is turned into middle. And down here it tells me that I did that 8 seconds into using the form. If I go to cube scored high and put it up, you'll notice that right here it changes and it shows when I put in those values. And lastly, if I put in docked down here, it'll let me know it was docked and when I put it in. This is the end for auto. The next video is going to go over teleop with your data input app.